It was an ordinary day on Earth, one like any other, when the skies changed forever. Across the globe, people paused to stare up at the heavens as enormous ships appeared from nowhere. They weren't the usual spaceships humans had grown used to hearing about. These were something else entirely. Massive, towering, metallic beings, their outlines gleaming under the sun like something from an ancient, forgotten legend. Their arrival caused chaos and confusion, but for reasons that would soon become clear, they were not here to destroy. The first of the Peacekeepers, as they would later be called, landed in the heart of the world's largest cities, sending shockwaves through the ground beneath. They were not violent, nor did they announce their arrival with loud explosions or dramatic gestures. Instead, they simply stood still, their massive forms looming like silent giants. People were frozen in awe and fear, unsure of what to expect from these creatures made of gleaming steel. The Peacekeepers were not entirely alien in appearance, at least not in the sense that most humans would think of. They were not monstrous or hostile-looking, but were strangely elegant, their bodies covered in armor that seemed to shimmer with unknown energy. Their eyes, deep, glowing orbs, seemed to see everything, watching from above as the world below panicked. At first, no one knew how to react. Governments scrambled to understand what was happening. Some feared an invasion, others thought the end was near. But there were whispers among the ancient races that had always been on Earth, watching and waiting in the shadows. The elder races, being so old that their stories were considered myths by humans, sensed the arrival of the Peacekeepers. They knew that something powerful had come to Earth, but they were unsure whether it was a friend or foe. In secret, the elder races convened. They had observed Earth for millennia, watching its progress, its rise, and its fall. They knew that humanity was on the edge of something new, something unknown. But what they didn't expect was the sudden appearance of these towering figures. Among them was an ancient being, one of the first to walk the earth in a time long before written history. This elder, wise and calm, decided to take the first step. It had been millennia since they had interacted with anyone, let alone beings from beyond the stars. But the Peacekeepers were different. They weren't like the destructive invaders from the past. They were something more. The elder moved quietly through the shadows, blending into the night. With a single, deliberate step, it approached the nearest Peacekeeper, a massive figure that stood silently in the middle of a bustling city square. The elder did not know what to expect, but there was no fear, only curiosity. As the figure's glowing eyes locked onto the elder, a strange hum filled the air, like an ancient forgotten song. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy, and the first words exchanged between the two beings were not spoken aloud. Instead, they passed between them in a silent, yet profound understanding. The elder knew then that this meeting would change everything. The Peacekeepers were not here to harm. They were here to watch, to learn, and perhaps even to protect. But their true purpose, that remained a mystery. The next day, news of the Peacekeepers' arrival spread like wildfire. The entire world had heard of them, and the world's governments were in a frenzy, unsure whether to treat them as allies or enemies. But the elder races, who had watched over Earth for eons, knew the time had come for a reckoning. They understood that the Peacekeepers weren't here by accident, and whatever their purpose was, it could not be ignored. Among the elders, there was one who had lived through centuries, witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations. His name was Erithar, and he had seen the way the world changed when humans arrived. He had always believed that humanity was more than just a young species. It had potential. But now, with the appearance of the Peacekeepers, Erithar felt the weight of a much larger story unfolding before him. The elder called a meeting with his fellow beings, those who had lived through times of peace and war, of love and destruction. They gathered in a hidden place, away from human eyes, their forms shifting and blending with the environment, ancient yet ever-present. They knew the importance of their decision. The Peacekeepers, Erithar said, his voice soft but filled with wisdom, are not our enemies, but they are not our allies either. We must understand why they have come, and we must do so carefully." The elders discussed and debated for hours, but the same idea kept rising to the surface. Someone needed to approach the Peacekeepers. They needed someone to make contact, to learn their intentions. After much deliberation, Erithar volunteered. He knew that the path ahead was dangerous, but he also understood that Earth's future depended on what they learned from this encounter. So, Erithar set out, alone, into the heart of the city where the Peacekeepers stood like silent sentinels. People watched from the streets, whispering among themselves, their eyes wide with fear and fascination. Some tried to approach, but the Peacekeepers remained unmoving, their metal bodies reflecting the sunlight in a way that made them seem even larger, even more powerful. As Erithar walked towards one of the towering figures, he could feel the weight of its gaze on him. The air around them seemed to hum, and for a moment, the world fell silent. There was no sound, no movement, just the elder and the Peacekeeper locked in a strange standoff. Erithar felt the weight of centuries in his bones, but he didn't falter. His steps were measured, deliberate. When he was close enough, the Peacekeeper's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and a strange energy filled the air. The figure bent slightly, as if recognizing Erithar's presence. Then, in a soft, mechanical voice, it spoke. "You seek answers," the Peacekeeper said, its voice cold but not unkind. "I have them. But I must first ask you, do you trust your kind?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Erithar stood still, knowing that this moment would determine much more than just his fate. The future of Earth and its relationship with these mysterious behemoths rested on his response. "I trust humanity," Erithar said finally. "But whether humanity trusts you, that is something we must discover together." The Peacekeeper's glowing eyes seemed to soften for a moment, as if considering his words. Then it spoke again, its voice echoing through the city square. "We will show you what you must know. But be warned, the path ahead will not be easy." With that, the first true conversation between the elder races and the Peacekeepers began. And with it, a new chapter in Earth's history was about to unfold. The conversation between Erithar and the Peacekeeper left a heavy silence hanging in the air. As Erithar stepped back, his mind was swirling with questions. What did the Peacekeepers truly want? What did their words mean? And most importantly, could humanity truly trust them? After the encounter, Erithar returned to the Elders' secret meeting place. The others were already waiting, their forms blending with the shadows, their eyes fixed on him as he entered. The Elder races were ancient beings, and they had witnessed countless events unfold across the millennia. They knew that every decision, every action, could change the future of Earth forever. And now, they needed to decide what the appearance of the Peacekeepers meant for them and the world. "What have you learned, Erithar?" one of the elders asked, their voice deep and ancient. There was a hint of worry in their tone, something that hadn't been heard in centuries. Erithar stood still for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The Peacekeeper had offered answers, but those answers only raised more questions. It had spoken of trust and warned that the future would not be easy. It was clear that they were not here for simple diplomacy. There was something more at play, something much larger than anything the elder races had ever faced. "They are not here to conquer," Erithar began, his voice steady but uncertain. "But they are not here to help either. The Peacekeepers are sentient beings, much like us, and they have come for a purpose. What that purpose is, I do not know, but they have warned me that the path ahead will be full of challenges." The room was filled with murmurs of concern as the elders exchanged looks. Some were worried, while others seemed more curious. The world they had watched over for so long was changing faster than any of them could have predicted. "You say they are sentient." Another elder spoke, their voice calm and measured. "Does that mean they can be reasoned with? Can they be trusted?" Erithar paused. The Peacekeeper had shown no aggression, no hostility, but its words were cryptic. Trust wasn't something that could be earned in a single conversation. Erithar could feel the weight of the decision upon him. "I believe they can be reasoned with," Erithar answered carefully. "But humanity, they are not ready. They will fear them, just as they fear the unknown." The elders sat in thoughtful silence. For centuries, they had lived in the shadows, guiding the world without being seen, without being known. But now, the time had come for a choice. Would they remain hidden and let humanity face this unknown threat on their own? Or would they reveal themselves to the world, showing their true power, in the hopes of guiding Earth through this uncertain future? After a long silence, an elder spoke, their voice ringing out with authority. "We cannot wait any longer. We must make a choice. But we must be careful. The humans must decide for themselves if they wish to work with the Peacekeepers. Our role is not to dominate, but to guide." The decision was made. The elder races would not reveal themselves just yet, but they would offer their help to humanity. They would watch, and when the time was right, they would step forward to protect the Earth and its people. But for now, the future was in humanity's hands, and the elder races could only hope that the Peacekeepers' intentions were truly as peaceful as they seemed. As the Peacekeepers stood motionless in cities around the world, the tension in the air grew. Governments met in urgent discussions, military forces were on high alert, and people whispered about the mysterious metal giants. Fear and uncertainty spread, and yet there was a strange sense of awe. No one knew what these colossal beings wanted, or if they were even capable of communicating with humans. Amid this chaos, one individual was chosen to represent humanity, a person with no experience in government or military affairs, but one who was trusted for their calm demeanor and ability to think outside the box. This person was a young scientist named Elena Carter. Elena had spent most of her life studying the unknown, aliens, deep space, and ancient mysteries. She had been part of a scientific community that researched extraterrestrial life, but never had she expected to face such an event. Elena was not the typical politician or military strategist. She was known for her ability to ask the right questions and to approach problems from different angles. Her understanding of human nature, combined with her scientific knowledge, made her the perfect choice to bridge the gap between Earth's leaders and these Peacekeepers. She was the wild card, the one who could possibly understand them when others could only fear them. The day after Erithar's encounter with the Peacekeeper, Elena was summoned. She stood before the world's leaders, nervous but determined. "I may not be the person you think should speak for humanity," she said, her voice clear, "but I will do my best to understand them, to make contact, and to find out why they are here." The leaders agreed, seeing her as their best hope to communicate with the Peacekeepers. They gave her all the resources they could: military support, technology, and information. But Elena knew that the true power lay not in weapons or technology. It was in understanding. With a small team of experts, Elena traveled to one of the cities where the Peacekeepers had landed. The streets were eerily quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. People stood at windows, watching from a distance, afraid to get too close. But Elena wasn't afraid. She had always believed that there was more to this universe than met the eye. She believed that the Peacekeepers weren't here to destroy, but to guide. When she arrived at the location, one of the Peacekeepers was standing tall in the city square, its massive frame casting a long shadow. Elena approached slowly, her heart racing, but she kept her calm. Her team had no idea how the Peacekeeper would respond, but Elena had a feeling that they wouldn't be able to communicate with force. She had to try something different. As she neared, the Peacekeeper's eyes shifted toward her. Elena stopped, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The metallic giant didn't move, but its presence was overwhelming. Then, a soft hum filled the air, almost like a low whisper. Elena stepped forward and spoke gently. "I don't know what you want, but I want to understand." The Peacekeeper's eyes glowed slightly, and Elena felt a strange connection, a subtle energy that seemed to reach out to her. For a moment, she thought she heard a voice in her mind. It wasn't words, but an emotion, a feeling of understanding. The message was clear. We have come to help, but we need trust. Elena took a deep breath. This was it. The first step toward understanding the Peacekeepers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to know they were not here as enemies. They were here for something more, something that had yet to be revealed. And it was up to Elena and the world to uncover it. The news of Elena's successful first contact with the Peacekeepers spread quickly, sparking both excitement and fear around the world. Some saw the Peacekeepers as potential protectors, others as invaders with unknown motives. As much as the governments and military forces tried to make sense of the situation, no one could truly understand what the Peacekeepers wanted. It was clear, however, that they weren't here to harm, at least not directly. Elena's team worked tirelessly with the Peacekeepers, trying to establish better communication. But the Peacekeepers remained mostly silent, revealing little about their purpose. They had made it clear that trust was the key to understanding. But trust was a difficult thing for humanity to give, especially when faced with beings as powerful as the Peacekeepers. The world still watched in fear, waiting for the next move. One day, an unexpected event occurred that would test the Peacekeepers' true intentions. A rogue group of humans, desperate to prove their power and influence, decided to attack one of the Peacekeepers. They believed that by confronting the giant beings, they could force them to show their true strength, and perhaps even send a message to the world that they would not be intimidated. The attack began early in the morning. A small group of armed soldiers, equipped with advanced weaponry, snuck up to the Peacekeepers standing in the heart of a major city. They aimed missiles, fired laser beams, and tried everything they could think of to bring it down. But no matter how much force they applied, the Peacekeeper stood unmoved, its massive frame barely even shaking. The Peacekeeper's glowing eyes flashed for a brief moment, and then something happened that no one expected. With a slow, deliberate movement, the Peacekeeper reached out a single hand, lifting the attackers' weapons with ease and tossing them aside, as if they were nothing more than toys. The soldiers, stunned by the sheer power of the Peacekeeper, tried to flee, but the giant being made no attempt to chase them. Instead, it simply stood there, its eyes watching the soldiers retreat. This was no act of violence. It was a demonstration of absolute control. The Peacekeeper didn't need to fight. It had already proven its dominance. The soldiers were no match for the Peacekeeper's strength, and the message was clear. Any threat would be dealt with without destruction. Elena, who had been observing from a distance, was both amazed and unnerved by the display. She knew the Peacekeepers had immense power, but this was a different kind of strength, one that didn't rely on aggression or destruction. It was a quiet, confident power that could end any conflict with a single gesture. But the world was not ready for this lesson in strength. Some saw it as a warning, a sign that the Peacekeepers could crush humanity if they so desired. Others saw it as proof that the Peacekeepers weren't to be trusted, that they were only here to control. Elena felt a deep sense of responsibility. The Peacekeepers were not invaders, but their strength was undeniable. The world had to decide. Would they fear these beings, or would they learn to trust them? The test of strength had shown that the Peacekeepers were not just powerful, they were also merciful, choosing not to engage in unnecessary violence. But would that be enough to convince humanity to embrace them, or would it push the world further into distrust? The next steps were crucial. Elena knew that the Peacekeepers were offering their help, but the world was not yet ready to accept it. It was up to her and the elders to ensure that humanity saw the Peacekeepers not as a threat, but as the strange, powerful allies they had the potential to become. In the days following the demonstration of strength, the world seemed to hold its breath. Governments debated what to do, citizens discussed the Peacekeepers in hushed voices, and media outlets scrambled for answers. Despite the Peacekeepers' calm demeanor and clear avoidance of unnecessary violence, fear lingered. It was the unknown that caused the most anxiety. What were these massive beings really here for? Could they be trusted? Elena Carter felt the weight of the responsibility resting on her shoulders. After the Peacekeepers' show of strength, The world was split. Some saw them as protectors, others as potential rulers. Alina had spent days trying to communicate with them, but their responses were cryptic and few. Despite everything, she knew that the key to understanding the Peacekeepers lay in their silence, their calm, and in what they had revealed so far. One evening, after another exhausting round of negotiations and research, Alina was summoned to meet with one of the Peacekeepers again. It was time for a deeper conversation. The human leaders had agreed to let Alina try once more to establish a meaningful connection. With her team and a few military officials as her backup, she arrived at the location where a peacekeeper had been stationed, its massive form towering over the city. This time, the atmosphere felt different. There was no tension, no fear in the air, only a deep, pressing curiosity. As Alina approached the peacekeeper, the air seemed to hum with energy. She could feel the weight of its gaze upon her, but instead of the usual unease, it was as if the peacekeeper was waiting for her to say something, to ask the right question. "Why are you here?" Alina asked, her voice steady, but filled with the question she could no longer keep to herself. The peacekeeper's eyes glowed brighter, and Alina felt an odd sensation in her mind, a presence that wasn't quite a voice, but something far more profound. A message not spoken aloud, but sent directly to her thoughts. "We are guardians," the message echoed inside her mind, a powerful yet calm force. "We are sent to protect this world from forces beyond your understanding. Your kind is on the cusp of something great, but you are unprepared. We have come to help you when the time is right." Alina stood frozen, the weight of the peacekeeper's words sinking in. Guardians, sent to protect. What did that mean? Who had sent them? And what were these forces beyond human understanding that they spoke of? The peacekeeper continued, its presence like a steady pulse in her mind. "The universe is not as it seems. There are others who seek to take what is not theirs. They have waited for millennia, just as you have. And when the time comes, you will need our help to face them." Alina's heart raced. She had known that the peacekeepers weren't here to conquer, but now she understood that there was a much larger picture, a cosmic battle that humanity had no way of preparing for. The peacekeepers weren't just passive observers. They were protectors, sent by an ancient force to ensure Earth's survival. The message didn't end there. It left Alina with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The peacekeepers weren't just a strange phenomenon. They were part of something far bigger. Earth was not just an isolated planet anymore. It had become a battleground in a much larger war, one that spanned the stars. The peacekeepers had been sent to Earth as its defenders, waiting for the right moment to intervene. As Alina stood there, processing the enormity of what she had just learned, she realized that humanity was standing on the edge of a new chapter. Whether they embraced the peacekeepers' help or rejected it would shape the future of Earth, and possibly the universe itself. The revelation had come, but with it, a deeper understanding of the immense responsibility humanity now faced. The choice was theirs, but it wasn't just a matter of trust anymore. It was about survival. The revelation Alina had received from the peacekeeper haunted her. Guardians. Protectors. The message had been clear, but it raised so many new questions. Who were these enemies that the peacekeepers spoke of? What threats lay beyond Earth? Alina found herself unable to sleep at night, the weight of what she had learned settling heavily on her shoulders. She had hoped for answers, but the peacekeepers had only given her more mysteries to unravel. Days passed, and the world continued to watch the peacekeepers with a mix of awe and fear. Humanity was still divided, unsure whether to embrace these towering beings or see them as a threat. Some governments called for caution, others for confrontation. The military continued to stay on high alert, their eyes on the peacekeepers, waiting for any sign of aggression. But the true danger wasn't coming from the peacekeepers. It was something much more insidious, something that had been lurking in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the world. One evening, as Alina sat in her office reviewing data from the peacekeepers' interactions with Earth, a message arrived. It was encrypted, and its source was unknown. Alina's heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. It was brief, but chilling. They are coming. The fragmented are awake. Prepare yourself. Alina's breath caught in her throat. The name was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakable. The fragmented were the enemies the Peacekeepers had warned about. She knew that the time had come. The Peacekeepers were not just here as passive observers. They were Earth's first line of defense against an ancient threat. The Peacekeepers had spoken of the universe being more complex than humanity could understand. Now, Alina understood what they meant. There were forces out there, alien races, perhaps, who sought to take what was not theirs. The fragmented were one such force, and they had been waiting, hidden in the dark corners of the cosmos, for the right moment to strike. The next morning, Alina gathered her team and informed them of the message she had received. The urgency was clear. Humanity had to be ready. The Peacekeepers had already begun their preparations, but Earth's leaders had to act quickly. The fragmented were not a threat that could be ignored. They were ancient, powerful, and ruthless. "We don't know when they will come," Alina said to her team, her voice steady but filled with fear. "But we have to be prepared. We have to trust the Peacekeepers. They know more than we do. And they are the only ones who can protect us." The world leaders were summoned for an emergency meeting. Alina spoke to them urgently, explaining what she had learned from the Peacekeepers and the message she had received. Some were skeptical. Others were terrified. But one thing was clear. Humanity's survival depended on working together, on trusting the Peacekeepers, and learning everything they could about the fragmented. As the days passed, the Peacekeepers began to reveal more about the fragmented. They were not just alien invaders. They were a race of beings that had been fractured by an ancient war, scattered across the universe, searching for a way to rebuild their power. The fragmented had the ability to manipulate minds, break apart civilizations from within, and used fear as a weapon. They were unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. The Peacekeepers knew that if the fragmented were allowed to reach Earth, the consequences would be catastrophic. They had been sent not just to protect humanity, but to prevent Earth from becoming the next target in the fragmented's endless campaign of destruction. The time for hiding was over. The battle for Earth had begun. But Alina and the Peacekeepers knew that this was only the beginning. The fragmented were coming, and humanity had to stand ready, united, strong, and prepared to fight for their survival. The news of the fragmented's impending arrival sent shockwaves across the globe. Panic spread faster than wildfire, but so did the determination to survive. Alina and the Peacekeepers had no choice but to rally Earth's forces, unite humanity, and prepare for a battle unlike anything the world had ever seen. For the first time, the fate of Earth wasn't just in the hands of its leaders. It was in the hands of everyone. Alina knew that the world was divided. People feared the Peacekeepers, still unsure of their true intentions. But now, there was no time to waste. The fragmented were coming, and humanity needed all the help it could get. She worked with the world's leaders to form an alliance, a coalition between Earth's military, the Peacekeepers, and the few other ancient beings who had revealed themselves to be watching over the planet. The elder races had been silent for too long, but now they had to act. The Peacekeepers shared their knowledge of the fragmented, explaining how they could manipulate minds, create division, and strike at the heart of a civilization without ever firing a single shot. They had no armies, no fleets of warships. Instead, they relied on chaos, fear, and deception. The Peacekeepers' primary goal was to stop them before the fragmented could turn Earth into another battleground in their endless war. As preparations for the coming conflict began, Alina felt a growing sense of responsibility. She had been the first human to understand the Peacekeepers, the first to see that they were not enemies, but allies. And now she had to convince the world of that truth. There could be no more hesitation. The Earth was at the brink of destruction, and unity was the only way to survive. Global broadcasts were arranged, and Alina addressed the planet. Standing in front of cameras, her voice calm but firm, she spoke to billions of people. Today, we face a threat that no one expected. The fragmented are not like any enemy we faced before. They don't conquer with weapons, they conquer with fear. But we are not alone in this fight. The Peacekeepers are here to help us, and together we will stand against the fragmented. This is our world, our home, and we will protect it. We will fight, and we will win. Her words were broadcasted everywhere, and while some still doubted, others began to see the truth in them. Slowly, humanity began to rally. Military units from all corners of the world began training with the Peacekeepers, learning the strategies and tactics they had developed over millennia. Technology and knowledge were shared, and weapons were forged, but the real strength came from the unity that grew among humans, the Peacekeepers, and the elder races. For the first time in history, the world was united, not by fear of the Peacekeepers, but by the necessity of survival. As the days turned into weeks, the tension grew. The sky seemed to hum with anticipation, as if even the earth itself knew that something was coming. The Peacekeepers' massive forms moved silently across cities and forests, standing guard, waiting. They weren't here to fight yet, but their presence was a constant reminder of what lay ahead. Elena spent hours each day coordinating with the military, the Peacekeepers, and the elder races, all while trying to maintain hope. She knew that the battle was coming, but she also knew that humanity had one advantage the fragmented didn't expect: unity. They were stronger together, and that would be their greatest weapon. The time was almost here. The Peacekeepers' warning had been clear: the fragmented were coming. And Earth, with its united forces, was ready to stand and fight. The day had arrived. The tension that had gripped Earth for weeks had reached its peak. From every corner of the globe, military forces, Peacekeepers, and even members of the elder races gathered for what was sure to be the greatest battle Earth had ever seen. The threat of the fragmented was no longer an abstract fear. It was real, and it was imminent. Elena, now fully immersed in her role as humanity's leader in this crisis, stood at the heart of the global alliance, looking out over the preparations. In the sky, the clouds were heavy, darkening with the impending arrival of the fragmented. The Peacekeepers stood like silent sentinels, their massive forms towering over the battlegrounds. The elder races, though few in number, had shared their ancient wisdom and power, lending strength to the human forces. And Earth's military, once uncertain and fractured, was now united, training alongside their otherworldly allies, ready for whatever was to come. Elena couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that lingered, though. Even with the strength of the united forces, the fragmented were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They didn't need armies to conquer. They needed only to manipulate, to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. It was a war of the mind, and it would take everything Earth had to resist. "Ready yourself," one of the Peacekeepers said to Elena, its voice calm and steady, though the enormity of the situation hung between them. "The fragmented are near. They are not far from here." Elena nodded. The day had come to face the enemy. The ground shook slightly as vibrations passed through the earth, a signal that something was approaching. It wasn't an army, but a force, silent, invisible, but undeniably powerful. The first signs of the fragmented's arrival came as whispers. No physical ships appeared, no soldiers marched forward. Instead, the air grew thick with an eerie, almost oppressive silence. The clouds above swirled, shifting into dark, chaotic patterns. And then the voices began. They were not heard in the traditional sense, but in the minds of everyone on the battlefield. The fragmented had arrived, and their first move was to divide, to sow distrust. They spoke of the Peacekeepers' true intentions, claiming that they were not here to protect, but to control. They whispered doubts into the hearts of the humans, urging them to break their alliances, to stand against the Peacekeepers. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire army might falter. Fear spread quickly, and some soldiers hesitated, unsure whether their allies were truly on their side. But Elena stepped forward, her voice clear, loud enough for all to hear. "We are not afraid of you," she said, her words cutting through the whispering confusion. "You will not divide us. This is our world, and we will fight for it." At her words, the Peacekeepers moved, their massive forms springing into action. They stood strong, their presence cutting through the fear and confusion like a beacon of light. The elder races stood by, their ancient power flickering to life. Together, they resisted the manipulation, pushing back the whispers that sought to divide them. The fragmented were powerful, yes, but they had underestimated humanity's will. They had underestimated the strength of a united world, a world that for once had set aside its differences to stand together. As the first wave of fragmented forces emerged, the battle began. The Peacekeepers clashed with the fragmented, their immense strength and technology battling against the mind-warping abilities of the invaders. But humanity was not just standing by. With the Peacekeepers, they fought, not with fear, but with the strength of unity. The elder races, too, unleashed their powers, pushing the fragmented back, repelling their efforts to break the will of Earth's defenders. The battle raged on, fierce and relentless. The skies darkened further as the two sides clashed. But slowly, steadily, Earth's forces began to gain ground. The fragmented, for all their power, could not match the resolve of humanity, the strength of the Peacekeepers, and the wisdom of the elder races. They had underestimated their opponents, and it would be their downfall. Elena stood at the front lines, watching as the battle unfolded. She felt the weight of every decision, every move that had brought them to this point. And in that moment, as the fragmented forces began to retreat, she knew the truth. Earth had won. The battle was not over yet, but the fragmented were on the run. The united front of humanity and its allies had triumphed. The victory was hard-earned, but it was a testament to the strength of a united world. Elena knew that this was just the beginning, that Earth had now become a part of something far larger, a force in the universe that could no longer be ignored. The sky above Earth was slowly clearing. The dark clouds, once filled with the tension of an impending war, were now fading, leaving behind a pale blue horizon. The battle was over, and Earth had won. The fragmented, powerful and manipulative as they were, had been driven back, their forces scattered and broken by the united strength of humanity, the Peacekeepers, and the elder races. It was a victory unlike any other. But even as the world celebrated, Elena Carter knew that this was only the beginning. The war was won, but the consequences of what had happened and what had been learned were only now beginning to unfold. The Peacekeepers had not just saved Earth. They had revealed a universe full of untold mysteries and threats. The elder races, too, had shared their knowledge, giving humanity a glimpse into a much larger world than they had ever imagined. As Earth began to rebuild, there was a new sense of hope and possibility. Governments that had once been divided now stood united, working together to ensure the future was secure. The Peacekeepers, though still a powerful presence, had become part of Earth's defense, their enormous forms standing as silent protectors. They were not invaders. They were guardians, watching over the planet they had sworn to protect. Elena stood in the middle of a bustling city square, surrounded by people who were no longer afraid. The streets, once filled with the chaos of uncertainty, were now filled with life, with people who had learned to trust in the allies they had once feared. The Peacekeepers, though still massive, now seemed less intimidating. They had proven themselves to be more than machines. They were beings of honor, capable of great wisdom and understanding. Elena had become a symbol of this new era, a bridge between humanity and the beings who had come to Earth not to conquer, but to protect. She had been the first to see that the Peacekeepers were not enemies, but allies. And now, humanity was learning to embrace them, to work alongside them for a better future. It wasn't just the Peacekeepers who had changed the world. The elder races, too, had shared their ancient knowledge, their powers, and their wisdom. Elena had learned much from them, about the universe, about the forces that shaped the stars, and about the delicate balance that kept everything in motion. The universe was vast, and Earth was no longer an isolated world. It was a part of something much larger, a force in the cosmic order that could no longer be ignored. As she walked through the city, Elena met with members of the Global Alliance. They discussed plans for the future, how Earth would continue to grow, how humanity could prepare for whatever threats might come next. The Peacekeepers stood nearby, their presence always felt, but no longer a source of fear. They were part of Earth now, not just protectors, but friends. The peace that had come after the battle was fragile, but it was real. The fight against the fragmented had taught humanity a valuable lesson. Unity was strength. Together, Earth had stood strong, and together, it would continue to face whatever the universe might throw its way. Elena looked up at the towering figure of a peacekeeper standing watch over the city. Its glowing eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was a silent understanding between them. The war was over, but the journey had just begun. Together, they would face the future, and whatever it held, Earth would be ready.